Okay, today I have an incredible guest. We're going to be going through Make America Healthy Again. We're going to be talking about what has changed in Donald Trump. Can RFK Jr. really make America healthy again? I know we've got to play a part in that. Also, we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of one of the biggest medical cover-ups in American history, maybe even world history. And I have a special guest to go through that. Now, this topic is the type of topic that can get a YouTube channel in trouble. And I want to bring you guys the truth. So to help me overcome any censorship, I'm asking you to please give this video a like and share it with friends. Let me now introduce you to my special guest, Mary Holland. Mary, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So let me give my audience some background on you and why I wanted to speak with you. So Mary Holland is a brilliant lawyer. She is a leading voice in health freedom. She resonates with me because she has a similar vision to RFK Jr. and President Trump when it comes to protecting children, getting the truth out about medicine. She is the CEO of the Children's Health Defense, where she fiercely advocates for vaccine choice, autism awareness, and medical fragility when it comes to children and government overreach. Let me ask this first question. This has really been on my mind. Is there collusion between the CDC, the WHO, Big Pharma, FDA to bury medical malpractice? And is there collusion to making and keeping us sick?
Well, there's definitely collusion. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily collusion for malpractice, but there's collusion to keep us sick. I think it'd be hard to see otherwise. We have a sick care system. 90% of the money that we spend on healthcare goes towards chronic health conditions. Most of these conditions didn't exist 50 years ago, or the percentage of people that had them was marginal. Today, way over 50% of children have either a chronic, at least one chronic health condition, including obesity or being overweight. So we're not a healthy population. As Robert Kennedy often says, we have the sickest kids in the world. We have the sickest population in the world, and we spend the most by far on our healthcare.
Yeah, you would think there would be a correlation, right? Like, okay, we spend all this money, therefore we are the healthiest in the world. But the reality is we're very sick and we spend too much money.
Exactly.
You're a lawyer, so when I said medical malpractice, let me couch that question a little bit different. For example, I believe that Pfizer, Moderna, they knew that they shouldn't be giving these shots to pregnant women, to children. They knew for a fact that this was causing heart issues, specifically within men. And yet, because they're driven by profit or to protect their reputation, they continue pumping out something that they know. That's what I meant by that.
And you're 100% right on that. So vaccines, unlike any other product in the world, have extraordinary liability protection. So literally for the COVID shots, which were called emergency use authorization, you cannot sue the government, you cannot sue the manufacturer, you cannot sue the governor, the doctors, you can't sue the government planners. So vaccines are in this very, very unique category where they have just incredible protection or immunity. They're supposed to be inducing immunity in people, which often doesn't work, but they have really the highest level of legal immunity that you can see anywhere.
Okay. I saw a cartoon that kind of summed this up best. It was a mother yelling at Big Pharma saying, "Hey, you promised me this would give us immunity." And Big Pharma says, only we get immunity when it comes to vaccines, right? Do you think that Ronald Reagan was tricked when he gave Big Pharma this, or do you think they just didn't know enough, or do you think it came from a good place, but then they said, wait a minute, there is hundreds of billions of dollars and we can just pump these out, we're protected? How did this come about?
Well, so as you mentioned, we on Friday of last week just did a 9-hour oral history of Simpsonwood. And one of the people who's really critical to Simpsonwood being a conference in 2000, where big pharma and government agencies in supposed health, they colluded in a non-private meeting to say, we're going to cover up the knowledge that we have that the mercury in vaccines is causing severe neurological damage. But in the 9 hours that is on our website, childrenshealthdefense.org, under CHDTV, there's an interview with Barbara Lowe Fisher, who was one of the leading parents back in the 70s and the 80s who fashioned this 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Law. She was representing the parents, and she was negotiating with Health and Human Services and with Big Pharma. And they did achieve many things. But when you really listen to what happened in those negotiations, it's pretty easy to see that pharma and the government knew from the beginning that this was going to be harmful. And what they really cared about was the bottom line, and that they would not be legally responsible when people were injured. And then they went to extraordinary lengths, as this documentary basically shows, to whittle down the compensation, to manipulate so that more vaccines could be given, to ensure that the truth was censored. And it's been an extraordinary 25 years. It's a really, really important record of key people in this legacy of the last 25 years and before.
Okay, I want to go deeper on that. I remember reading a snarky article about vaccines and mercury, and they were basically saying there's only 2 places on planet Earth where mercury is safe. It's not safe in your thermometer. It's not safe in your hand. It's not safe in your home. It's not safe in your blankets. It's not safe here, 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 here. The only place that it's safe is injected into your arm or in one of your teeth. And the dental industry, they have just quietly stopped using amalgam and mercury and gone to these resins and epoxies and things. So they'll never admit that. But I just find it very interesting that this cover up happened. So let me go a little deeper on this Simpsonwood thing, because we're coming up on the 25th anniversary. So this was a secret meeting between big pharma and government that the public was not made aware of, but somebody got the transcripts of it.
Right. So what happened in 1979 is, in 1997, is that the FDA, there was a Congress passed a law called the FDA Modernization Act, and they required the pharmaceutical industry to tell the Congress everywhere there was mercury in the products. And to basically, the idea would be to phase them out. And so suddenly the world, the FDA, the CDC became aware that there were really huge levels of mercury in the vaccines that they were giving. Somehow they had been fairly oblivious because they had liability protection. They hadn't made the connection. But for instance, the first speaker is Lynn Redwood, the first president of Children's Health Defense. She was also an absolute leader in this, who's pointing out that her son had 125 times the limit of mercury that he should have had, according to EPA levels, when he was 5 years old, and he had been diagnosed with autism. And he had regressed from having been a healthy child. So it was that Modernization Act that led to this recognition. And then the CDC did convene this meeting of, oh my gosh, we have done the studies to look at the children who got this birth dose of a hepatitis B vaccine that contains thimerosal, the mercury-containing preservative, and children that didn't get that shot. And we see vast differences in children who are later diagnosed with autism, with tics, with Tourette's, with seizures, with all kinds of learning disabilities. And this meeting at Simpsonwood was really, how do we bury this? How do we make sure that plaintiffs' lawyers don't find out about this? How do we make sure that the press doesn't find out about this? How do we manipulate the data so that the signal isn't so strong? How do we just move along and not lose trust in medicine and literally not change anything, Stephen? They were not about protecting children. They were all about protecting themselves.
Wow. That's sad.
It
You know,
is.
I do I do a political show 7 days a week. It's very taxing on my body and my mental health, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you must just love talking about the government and politics." And I'm like, "No, I hate it. I hate it. That's why I do my show,
Yeah.
because government, in most cases, government is the problem.
Yeah.
They're not Big Brother that has your back. They're Big Brother that's spying on you,
Yeah.
that's colluding." Um, it's just sad that these cover-ups exist. You know, like, most people don't realize that scientists at Harvard were bought off to say that sugar was
Yeah.
making people sick. And then sugar got all these government subsidies, and all of a sudden, fat got
Yeah.
this bad reputation. Low fat, switch from butter to margarine, only drink skim milk. I remember growing up, and
Me
all my
too.
parents' friends and my friends' parents, they all drank skim milk. And my
Yeah.
parents always just stuck with 2% or whole milk. We always drink whole milk, right? But then I see this Harvard study and I go, wait a minute, these are supposed to be the best of the best scientists lying to the American public.
I think, you know, when you've studied enough of these cover-ups and some of the bad things that government do, you come away with this appreciation that it's not that hard to buy people off. I mean, that's the sad reality, is that people find they have prices and they're willing to lie. And the people, so not everybody, as Lynn Redwood points out in this documentary about Simpsonwood, you know, there were people that weren't invited to that convening because they did want to stop those shots right away. There were people who expressed real grave concerns about what was happening, and they weren't invited to come back the next day. I mean, this was a group of very industry oriented, industry friendly people who basically called these shots, so to speak. But the tragedy, Stephen, is that, you know, they knew what was happening. That's very clear. And the autism rates in, you know, 1985 were 1 in 1,000. We're now at 1 in 31 children. It's 1 in 12 and a half boys in California. This cover up has come at an enormous human cost and a huge monetary cost too. Of course, Pharma happens to be the beneficiary of that cost, right? So a lot of the people with autism diagnoses are put on pharmaceutical drugs, which for the most part aren't particularly helpful, but they're very common and they're very expensive.
You just provoked a thought in me, Mary. Okay, so earlier I said we pay the most for healthcare and we're the most sick. Like, you would think that that would be a different relationship. Why, if California is the most heavy-handed with vaccines, and I mean, you can't buy a lawnmower without it saying it could give you cancer. You can't buy a dishwasher without it saying it could give you cancer. Why on earth are so many boys in California becoming autistic? It's the most regulated state, and it's the
Right.
one pumping out the most
Yeah.
autistic children.
Um, you know, you're assuming that there's logic at play here. There's not. California is very bizarre. I fought just right now, I've been helping to fight against the repeal of the religious exemption in Massachusetts. California was really the first. And in 2015, the California legislature removed the personal belief exemption that incorporated a religious exemption to vaccines. And that basically sent tens of thousands of parents that were unwilling to vaccinate their children according to the state schedule around the country. California is strange that way. You're absolutely right. They have, in some ways, better warning labels than other states, and in some ways seem much more hyper-regulated. And part of the ethos is you don't get to decide. This is public health. We know what's best. We're the government. And the reality is the rates of autism, the rates of special education and facilities for the adult population and even the younger population that can't live independently is off the charts in California. And sadly, there's a lot of corruption there too.
Yeah, I remember during the COVID lockdowns, we were seeing people like Gene Simmons from Kiss saying, you know, if you don't get
Yeah.
vaccinated, you should die. We saw late night host shows saying you should be blocked from getting care at a hospital. Arnold Schwarzenegger, screw your freedoms. It's like all of a sudden they wanted the government to be in charge of our medicine, our bodies, right? So it was just the hypocrisy was really interesting
It is.
to watch. Let me ask you this. I don't know that this has anything to do with, Trump being shot in the ear or all that he has been through, but I noticed from covering term number 1 to term number
Right.
2, he seems much more interested in health, protecting children,
Yeah.
collusion in the government, corporate capture. Do
Yeah.
you know anything about that? Is it just
Yeah.
a different focus because he's now 4 or 5 years older than last time? If you give your body what it needs, the immune system can take care of you. That's how God and nature designed our bodies. And I want to tell you about a way to raise your happiness levels, your immunity, your bloating, your waistline. All of these things improve when you take kimchi. This is Kimchi One by Brightcore. They've been a sponsor of the channel for many, many months. I take this. My family takes this. My 11-year-old who had bowel issues, were able to clear these up with kimchi. Now, there's good bacteria and bad bacteria in your gut. You have to flourish, nurture, give life to the good bacteria. In each capsule of kimchi is 900 strains of the good bacteria. You got to check them out. They're absolutely amazing. Now, if you go to mybrightcore.com/kimchi or snap the QR code, you're going to get 25% off. But you guys are smarter than that. Call them right now, 888-908-4425. Get up to 50% off plus free shipping. Do your gut a favor. Do your health and your happiness a favor. And do your wallet a favor. Call them at 888-908-4425 for up to 50% off plus free shipping.
Well, Bobby Kennedy has talked a lot about this, that after that very serious assassination attempt, he, having lived through the assassination of his uncle and his father, he reached out to Donald Trump immediately to just give his support and love for, this horrendous thing that had just happened to him. And apparently that connection really blossomed, and they connected in a way that they hadn't. And I can well imagine that for Donald Trump as a human being, coming that close to being killed, it probably did make him reflect even more about, what do I want to achieve in this second term? What will be my legacy? And I think Bobby Kennedy had really given the last 20 years of his life at Children's Health Defense, where he's the founder, and in other ways of telling the truth and leaving a better world for children, whether that was in the environment or whether that was health. And so I think Donald Trump was eager to have Bobby Kennedy leave his presidential race and join him in his effort to become president. And I think that negotiation was clearly in part about children. And I have to say that Donald Trump, even before he ran for president for the first term, he, on his Twitter account, was talking about autism. And he was saying quite explicitly, what is the story with these vaccines? It's so many for these tiny babies, and I've seen them regress. So this was clearly something that he cared about. But I think Bobby Kennedy brought it to fruition. And Bobby Kennedy did have many millions of voters who were supporting him. This MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, I think was pivotal. And President Trump has acknowledged that the votes that Bobby Kennedy brought to his ticket were pivotal in this past 2024 election.
Okay. Yeah, I wondered, I read all these stories about Trump secretly paying people's medical bills, being very concerned. I mean, at the State of the Union, he brought that little boy that had like 13 brain tumors removed. So I believe that it's always had a place in his heart. He's a grandpa, he's got all these grandkids now since 2016. And but I do think Bobby probably played a role in saying, hey, listen, you've maybe never heard this because you've been busy building buildings and golf courses, but da 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 da. And he goes, oh, wait a minute, this is actually very, very eye-opening. I know that's how it was for my wife and I when we realized, oh, wait a minute, our health has to be our health. Like, we've got to take control of our own health, our own future. We've got to advocate for our children. I love most doctors. I'm not here to bash on doctors, but they go through 10, 12, 15 years of textbook training. And then, they're saddled with all of this debt and then these hospital systems and insurance. And at the end of the day, they're like, listen, I got 15 minutes to talk to you and try to diagnose. So my heart goes out to the medical. When it comes to parents, Mary, are most parents maybe too trusting that there was all of this good science behind vaccines, that they were going through the same rigorous, arduous, difficult testing? I mean, some of these drugs, I don't know, Viagra, I can't think, like, that's the one that pops into my mind, but all of these major drugs, they go through years and years, phases of testing. And now we're finding out there wasn't the same level with vaccines. Are parents just assuming that has all been done?
I think up until very recently, parents did assume that why would the FDA and CDC not be working in my interest, right? The taxpayers pay for them. They're created by Congress, I think. And in many ways, the FDA and CDC have had good reputations. But when it comes to vaccines, what most people have no idea about is like I mentioned before, there's no liability for this. If your child is injured, you cannot sue pharma, you cannot sue a doctor. You have to go to a compensation program that's basically a kangaroo court. But the other thing is that because vaccines can be used in the context of a pandemic, much like what we just lived through with COVID, there's this idea that they have to be made really quickly, and there's not the opportunity to go through those 5 years of testing and to use this standard, the gold standard, double-blind placebo-controlled trials. So for drugs, you're absolutely right. Blockbuster drugs, all kinds of blockbuster drugs, they basically go through 4 to 5 years of clinical trials, phase 1, 2, and 3. And there have to be real controls. Somebody gets an inert substance, they get saline, they get sugar water, they don't get anything. And then there's liability for the pharmaceutical industry. Vaccines have none of those protections, right? They have short clinical trials. For hepatitis B, for instance, is given to children. There was 5 days of monitoring. The clinical trials before that, they didn't even have a control group. It's mind-blowing. Of everything that's recommended on the childhood schedule today, none of them had true control groups. None of them had people getting true inert placebos and only inert placebos. So that's one of the things that Robert Kennedy, in coming in as HHS secretary, has insisted on, is that any new vaccines have to have true placebos. And he's talking about radical transparency, gold standard science. Those things mean telling the public what you find, good or bad, and requiring that it use real controls, right? Use what is standard in science. You have to be testing one variable. You can't have variables on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Well, I wish him luck, because he's up against the largest lobbying groups in America, some of the biggest dollars. Almost 70 to 80% of the mainstream media's income comes from big pharma. So they're not going to badmouth them, like, they're going to control what information gets out to us. We talked about, you just mentioned this, maybe a few years ago, but not today. But with that same thinking, a few years ago, but not today, I think most Americans believed that they were living in a system where it was genuine health care and they just had medical issues, right? And now I think a lot of them are realizing that they're living in a system of sick care that's driven by profits. Yeah. And I get that people have to make money, but shouldn't health care and healthy living be the focus?
100%. We would hope that our government, the people that we pay to protect us, would have an investment in seeing us be healthy. We can't have a thriving country. We can't have a thriving economy. We can't have, happy, long lives without basic health. And as Kennedy has said, these are not mutually exclusive. If you have healthy people, you're going to have a healthier economy. You can have a healthy environment. Like, everything is better, if people are healthy. And sadly, we really have a system between the pharmaceuticals, between the food, between some of the pollution in the environment. We really do live in a toxic soup. We really are not doing all the things that we can. And so I'm very excited to see, almost ironically, in this second term of President Trump, a real emphasis on make America healthy again. And so just a couple weeks ago in Washington, there was the first public convening of this commission, the Make America Healthy Again Commission. And, the Secretary of Agriculture was there, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the head of the FDA, the head of not the CDC, that hasn't been confirmed yet, but the FDA, National Institutes of Health. It's exciting. I do believe that there's opportunity. I'm not here to tell you that they've solved it all. Far from it, Stephen. There's so much to do. And many people are critical. Some of the things that have happened are kind of half measures. But as you point out, they are up against the bureaucracy. They're up against the pharmaceutical industry. They're up against people who've been entrenched there for a long time. They're up against the media. They do get the vast majority of their revenue from advertising from the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay. I don't know if you know this or not, but I listened to this Dr. Casey Means and this former lobbyist in Washington, D.C., Casey Means. What I hear them saying makes a lot of sense, but a lot of people are very, very suspicious of them. They're critical of her path through medicine, his past with lobbyists. What do you make of them? Because I know I'm seeing a lot of really mixed messages. Some people are saying, hey, they're great. We want these outsiders. Others are saying RFK Jr. has been hijacked. He's making terrible decisions. Like, what are your thoughts on those two?
My thoughts are that overall, they're the people that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants at his side helping him. And I really have worked with him for 15 years. I trust his judgment. So my perception is that Casey did leave a sort of traditional medical practice because she realized that it was sick care, and she started a wellness kind of practice and focused on helping people who have diabetes get off of diabetes drugs and actually handle their metabolism. Callie was a lobbyist. I've spent a fair amount of time listening to him and being at meetings. And I do think that he is good at persuading people. That's what lobbyists do. And so I think that he is working with people within the government, working with people at the state level to advance the MAHA agenda. So it's easy to criticize from the sidelines, Stevens. It's a lot harder to get things done, especially to get things done in the divided America that we live in. So as I say, those are the people that Bobby Kennedy, as Secretary of HHS, wants. I trust his judgment that it's not for me to figure out what's the best way for him to advance his agenda that I completely support.
Okay. My favorite part about judging people, Mary, is it's just so easy.
It is. It's very easy to judge, right?
Loving people is the hard part.
That's much harder.
It's that my wife said to me, this was like 15 years ago. I just want to do something easy tonight. I said, oh, should we just go to the mall and judge people? Of course we were joking, but that always stuck with me, that it's just so easy to judge people. And it's sometimes very hard to love people. Okay. I appreciate your insight on that, because again, I listen to them on Joe Rogan. I listen to them on the Concrete podcast. I listen to them on several others. And I thought they sound like they're making sense. Somebody with an extensive background in diabetes. I mean, diabetes is like the most expensive part of Medicaid that everybody is worried about. It's a rising epidemic. And so to me, that makes a lot of sense. But then you have people like, there's this Dr. Jack Kruse that I really like to listen to. Yeah. He was super pro RFK Jr. in Bitcoin. And then RFK gets in there and moves slower. And next thing he's like
Yeah.
deceived all of us. And I just hate to, I don't think people realize like you're going up against the biggest money and lobbyists in the world.
Leviathan. Yeah.
And I mean, his uncle was assassinated. His father was assassinated. Like, I don't think he takes these things lightly. At the same time, he's very courageous to step
Oh
into
my
this
gosh.
position. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. This is a really, frankly, impossible job. And, he has security details for a reason. He's had many attempts against his life and many warnings over the years. He's a very courageous man. And he really is doing this because he cares about passing on a world to his children and to our children that is worthy of them. We're really destroying our children. As at this meeting, the first meeting of the Maha Commission, so many of the people there said, this is just morally wrong, that our children are less healthy and will live shorter lives. This is wrong. We can't do this. And there was a sense of moral commitment, a kind of moral indignation that I really think that Secretary Kennedy has helped to encourage and to inculcate. And that's what's needed. This is not going to be easy, but I do think that he is courageous and he's taken on a really hard job. But I think he's making headway. So I know some people are very frustrated and very critical. I think we have to support everything we can. And of course, we have to call out what we think is wrong. And I support people to do that too.
Yeah. What do you make of this idea of, New Zealand and the United States of America being the only two countries that allow big pharma to infiltrate the media and the advertising space the way that they do? If Bobby is able to remove that, how do you see that changing medicine and ad spend dollars?
Yeah. It is extraordinary that since the 1990s, the US and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that permit direct to consumer prescription pharmaceutical drug advertising. And even in New Zealand, with a population of 4 million, Stephen, there are way more restrictions than we have here. So we're advertising vaccines on TV, we're advertising psychiatric drugs, we're, restless leg syndrome. Literally, you watch TV and you realize, this is for somebody with leukemia. There can't be that many people that they're advertising to. And what you then understand is, oh, they're not really advertising. They're just buying control of what this show can put on, right? So Pharma has made sure that people like me and other people who might be critical of the pharmaceutical industry, critical of psychiatric drugs, critical of opioids, critical of vaccines, we've never gotten airtime because the networks have been controlled. So this was started by President Clinton by executive order. And I must tell you, I am waiting to see when President Trump will do this. Obviously, he will buy enemies by doing so, but it will be a radical transformation when the pharmaceutical industry can no longer own mainstream media. But on the other hand, the truth is mainstream media has declined so much over the last 20 years that by the time that, if and when that happens, it may be much less of a radical shift than I just said, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think they're going to start trying to infiltrate little shows, right? I have 2 million. I still consider myself a little show compared to Fox News or CNN or something like that. But during the pandemic, Pfizer offered me $30,000 to tell people to get the vaccine. $30,000 for 60 seconds of work. That's how much money they knew they could make. I'm not CNN. I'm not ABC News. I'm like one little creator. And then you find out all these people that were smaller than me, they were just hitting them up with big cash deposits on TikTok. It was gross to me.
Oh.
These are teeny boppers putting out dance stuff that then stop and say, hey, I love doing these dances, but you should really get your vaccine. You're not a doctor. You don't know jack squat.
Right.
about what this could do to my body. That was really bothersome to me.
Oh, all the financial incentives. You remember, you got a free hamburger, you got a free, joint, you get a college tuition in the lottery. I mean, the financial incentives worldwide for getting the COVID shots were shocking, horrifying. It is absolutely the antithesis of informed consent. So the Nuremberg Code is 75 years old, and that was adopted after the medical atrocities became known from Nazi Germany. And it's, no duress, no coercion, but also like you have to be competent. There should be nothing except the risk and the benefit, and you, the patient, make an informed choice. And so everything about COVID really distorted everything about medicine. And I do think that people are awake to that now, as they must be, because it's not all over yet. It's still, this is a process. And I pray that things will become more and more open and more transparency, particularly about what did happen during COVID, because I do believe that millions of people died needlessly.
Yeah. Yeah, that informed consent, the ability to do research without pressure. Like right now, I'm studying two medications. One that someone recommended that I want to bring information to my doctor. The other one my doctor recommended, but I'm like, I don't know a lot about this, so I want to do that research. None of that was happening during COVID. It was just all emotions and fear and manipulation, and it was really gross. What about, do you see Bobby Kennedy or Trump doing anything about revoking the liability shield for vaccines so that people either get the information that they need or we get better products? Like on paper, vaccines make a lot of sense, but
Right.
then you start actually reading the papers and you go, oh gosh, I don't know if this is worth
Yeah.
the risk.
Yeah. They can't just lift the liability shield, Stephen. Both of the major laws, the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act and the 2005 PrEP Act, the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, those are both passed by Congress. So ultimately, these things are going to require congressional action. But I do believe that Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump, by giving the public truthful information, can create a kind of popular upsurge that could lead to major change politically. I mean, I think we're already seeing that. And I don't think that this process is over. I think as more truth comes out, and more, gold standard science. One of the things that Bobby Kennedy promised in the last month or so is by September, he will start revealing what does the real science show, what do the records that they have, the millions of records from Medicaid and other databases, what does it show about the correlations of autism and anything else? So I think that the public is going to move the political actors, but it will not be easy to get rid of those liability shields. And those liability shields are incredibly dangerous, as we've seen.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was just off the top of my head, there's between the House and the Senate, 535 individuals who all receive a lot of money from Big Pharma.
Yeah.
They receive a lot of money from the military industrial complex, big oil, climate. Like they're being influenced by money and voices all the time. But if Big Pharma has the most lobbyists of any of the lobbies, you just have to imagine how many of those 535, it would be hard to convince, give up the money to do what's right, which is remove the liability and get us better products or get us the truth. I think that's why RFK Jr. understands he has to come at this from an education. Like, here's the truth in science. Yeah. And then you can make a decision. Because there's medicines out there right now that people, they go, okay, I've got to inject myself with Humira. Here's the side effects, but at least they know what they are. Right. But if you're not getting that information, to me, that seems like you're being lied to, or you're counting on the fact that the patient or the patient's parent doesn't know enough to say yes or no.
Exactly. I think Secretary Kennedy is acutely aware that whatever he does by fiat will simply be reversed if people don't have a rationale for it. I think he recognizes that he has to bring to the truth, bring to public consciousness, new information that they didn't know before, so that they will themselves want to change their actions because they have greater knowledge. So I think his job is really bringing us new knowledge, and he's actively working on that.
Okay. My wife, some of her friends, people that I go to dinner with, they all said to me, "Hey, uh, Bobby Kennedy's not doing much. I thought he was going to come in and immediately revoke the COVID vaccines, right?" And
I
I said,
know.
"Well, let me tell you what he has done. He's canceled hundreds of millions of dollars in new stuff, hundreds of millions of dollars in flu stuff, new research, new pills, oral stuff. He's also said, you want to sell this? You guys have to be more upfront about the side effects and the potential downside." I said, his hands have to be tied on being able to just revoke something immediately. And they're like, "Oh, well, that makes a lot more sense." So I just think there's a lot of people out there that think just because he's in the driver's seat, he can control all of these other companies. I just don't think that's true.
It's not true. He doesn't have a magic wand, and he has already done more in the first 4 months, I think, than the last HHS secretary did in 4 years in terms of really moving us towards health. As you say, he's cut funding. He's changed, generally recognized as safe at the FDA. He's just, I think today, terminated some of the people on the vaccine advisory board. He's put in new people with very different perspectives as sort of the lead of the agencies. He did revoke the COVID shot recommendation for pregnant women and children if they are healthy, which was a major shift. But I think his sights are to do a lot more. But exactly as you say, he's got a whole host of people that he has to bring along with him, right? The bureaucracy, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical profession, the media, Congress. It's not an easy job.
No, I imagine it's not. Okay, final question. This has been as informative and delightful as I imagined it would be. Over at the Children's Health Defense, what is your guys' main focus? Do you individually represent families, or is it like class action, or is it about education, or holding the government or big pharma accountable? What exactly do you guys do?
So, our mission is to end the epidemic of chronic childhood disease. That is our focus. We want to advance children's health, full stop. And we do that through education, advocacy, science, and litigation. So we put out a daily newsletter, The Defender. It's free. Go to childrenshealthdefense.org to sign up. We have a streaming platform, CHD TV. We go live every day at 10 a.m. And then we have special programming. So if there's a hearing in Congress, we'll run that. We just did this documentary on Simpsonwood. We're publishing peer-reviewed science, particularly related to vaccines, but also we're very active in the electromagnetic radiation space and also geoengineering. We think these are real concerns, and food. So we're publishing about that. We're working in that space. We have advocacy. So we do action alerts. We're going to Washington. We're quite involved in litigation. So we are suing on behalf of children in a variety of capacities. Where they're deprived of valid medical exemptions, where they're being deprived of valid religious exemptions, censorship of the work we do. We have a case against Meta Platforms, Facebook, that will be conferenced by the Supreme Court in a couple of weeks. We have a case on behalf of Dr. Pierre Corey, who has been deprived of medical free speech in the state of California. So we're trying to advance the ability for people to make their own medical choices, and particularly for children, and not just medical choices, but choices, informed choices about food, about the water you drink, about what's the role of fluoride, about the air that you breathe. We're trying to restore a healthy environment so our kids will be at least as healthy, if not healthier, than we've been.
Okay. Well, God bless you guys for what you're doing. If people want to see that that documentary about the Simpsonwood secret meeting of collusion, that's on the website as well?
Yeah. If you just go to childrenshealthdefense.org, you will, in the carousel, you will see Simpsonwood. Just click on that. That'll take you right to the platform, and you can watch any of the individual conversations. So there's conversation with Andy Wakefield, there's conversation with Barbara Fisher, there's conversations with a lot of really interesting people. You can watch the whole thing, or you can just selectively choose some.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to put that direct link down below. Mary Holland, thank you for all that you do and for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Stephen.